When most people think of royal mansions, they picture glittering chandeliers, endless lawns, and rooms filled with priceless paintings. But few homes in Britain carry as much mystery and controversy as Royal Lodge, a grand yet troubled estate sitting quietly inside Windsor Great Park. Its story isn't just about fine architecture or royal luxury. It's about power, family struggles, money, and secrets. The kind of secrets that still make people whisper and wonder. What's really going on behind those gates? Imagine a house worth around $30 million, built on nearly 100 acres of some of the most valuable land in all of England. Now imagine that same mansion costing $4 to $5 million every year just to keep it standing, to fix the leaking roofs, repaint the cracked walls, and keep the sprawling gardens alive. For most people, that amount is impossible to imagine. But for Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, this isn't just a number. It's his reality. And his biggest problem. Because even though Prince Andrew's official royal income was cut off years ago, the bills for Royal Lodge somehow keep getting paid. It's one of the most expensive mysteries in modern British history. A house where mold creeps through the walls as quietly as the rumors about where the money comes from. To understand how this once great home turned into a royal headache, we have to step back into the world of Windsor, of family pride, and of a royal past that refuses to fade away. A grand home in decline. From the outside, Royal Lodge looks like a dream. It stands proudly within Windsor Great Park, only 3 miles from Windsor Castle, where generations of British monarchs have ruled. The main mansion follows the Georgian style, a tall central block with 2 smaller wings, perfectly balanced and symmetrical. It's a design meant to impress, to signal power wrapped in beauty. But when you get closer, the illusion starts to crack, literally. The paint peels, the walls have splits running down their length, and a musty smell fills rooms that were once filled with laughter and royal parties. Engineers say the structure itself is shocking, parts of it almost impossible to save without millions in repairs. Yet, for all its problems, Prince Andrew refuses to leave. Inside its 7 bedrooms, the Duke still lives with his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York. Yes, even though they divorced in 1996, nearly 30 years ago, they still share the same home. To outsiders, it's one of the strangest royal arrangements ever. To insiders, it's part of the mystery. Why won't they move out? Is it comfort, stubbornness, or strategy? Every detail of this decaying mansion tells a story of love, loss, and the price of royal privilege. From dairy farm to royal mansion. To understand the present, we have to go back to the beginning, when this royal estate wasn't royal at all. In the 1600s, the land that would one day hold Royal Lodge was just a quiet dairy farm known as Watkins House. It was surrounded by rolling meadows and tall trees, and cows graze peacefully where guards with rifles now patrol. In 1750, the property was home to Thomas Sandby, a gifted artist, architect, and mapmaker. Sandby was talented, but he wasn't interested in wealth or luxury. Still, his artistic eye gave the simple farmhouse a touch of charm, the first spark of elegance in a place that would one day become a royal residence. Then came 1812, the year everything changed. George, Prince of Wales, who would later become King George IV, needed somewhere to stay while Cumberland Lodge nearby was being rebuilt. So the future king temporarily moved into this humble farmhouse. Of course, when a royal moves in, nothing stays humble for long. Enter John Nash, one of Britain's most celebrated architects, the same man behind the grand designs of Regent's Park and Buckingham Palace. Nash was a visionary. He believed architecture could tell a story. And for the Prince of Wales, he turned the simple farmhouse into something almost magical. Nash gave the house a romantic fairy tale appearance, with charming thatched roofs, elegant verandas, and soft, natural colors that blended into the countryside. It was meant to look like a cozy cottage, but in truth, it was a luxurious royal hideaway. The design fit perfectly with the spirit of the early 19th century, a time when the British elite loved the idea of rural simplicity, as long as it came with comfort and servants. Royal Lodge became the definition of country chic, the place where royalty could pretend to live simply while still surrounded by wealth. The chapel in the Clash of Kings. In 1825, architect Geoffrey Wyatville added a small but elegant church to the property, the Royal Chapel of All Saints. He claimed it was unavoidable, since the royal household needed its own place of worship. The chapel still stands today, tucked quietly among the trees. Over the centuries, it has witnessed births, weddings, and funerals, moments of joy and grief that shaped the royal family. But back in the 1800s, it also sparked one of the first big debates about the cost of royal living. When King William IV took the throne in 1830, he was furious about how much money his predecessor had spent, turning a farmhouse into a miniature palace. He thought the whole thing was wasteful and unnecessary. So, in an act of royal rage, he ordered most of Nash's design to be demolished, sparing only the conservatory. After that, Royal Lodge was rebuilt again, this time in the more formal Georgian style that defines it today. It was elegant, balanced, and far less romantic than Nash's cottage vision. Ironically, the mansion's pattern of being built, demolished, and rebuilt would continue throughout its life. It was a house that never stopped demanding more money, more attention, more care. A family home for the future queen. By the early 1900s, Royal Lodge had become more than just another royal property. It was about to become a home filled with family, laughter, and the future of the monarchy itself. In 1931, King George V gifted the estate to his son, Prince Albert, the Duke of York, and his wife, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. They were overjoyed. It gave them a chance to build a life away from the constant formality of London. Here, they could raise their two daughters, Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret, in peace. Working with architect Sir Eric Saville, they renovated and expanded the mansion, creating beautiful gardens that reflected Elizabeth's love of nature. Soon, Royal Lodge wasn't just a residence. It was a living, breathing home. For Princess Elizabeth, who would one day become Queen Elizabeth II, childhood at Royal Lodge was filled with warmth and wonder. She and Princess Margaret spent hours exploring the gardens, playing with their dogs, and riding ponies across Windsor Great Park. While Windsor Castle stood nearby as a symbol of power and duty, Royal Lodge was something softer, a place where the royal family could laugh, relax, and simply be together. Those early days left a mark on Queen Elizabeth II that lasted her entire life. Whenever she spoke of Windsor, it was with a tone of affection, because for her, this park and this home were the heart of her childhood. Royal Lodge. During the war, the 1930s peace didn't last. When World War II broke out in 1939, the royal family, like the rest of the nation, faced dark and uncertain days. King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, as the Duke and Duchess of York were now known, often stayed at Windsor Castle for safety, but Royal Lodge remained an important refuge. It became a place of calm when the outside world was filled with chaos. The young princesses studied, played, and even rehearsed their first radio speeches here, while bombs fell over London. For the king and queen, the estate represented strength and resilience. It was proof that even in wartime, the royal family would endure and stay close to their people. Behind its ivy-covered walls, Royal Lodge became a quiet symbol of hope, the Queen Mother's beloved home. When King George VI died unexpectedly in 1952, the world mourned, and Queen Elizabeth, their daughter, became the new monarch. But for her mother, now known as the Queen Mother, life changed in a different way. She made Royal Lodge her permanent home, turning it into a sanctuary of memory and love. For the next 50 years, she would live there, the longest any royal has ever called it home. Under her care, Royal Lodge came alive again. The gardens flourished with roses and wildflowers, the rooms glowed with warmth, and guests from around the world came to enjoy her legendary hospitality. Politicians, artists, and close friends were invited to tea parties, picnics, and dinners, where laughter often filled the halls. The Queen Mother's spirit gave the house a kind of magic. It was both elegant and comforting, royal yet homely. Her grandchildren, including Prince Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward, all spent time there. To them, it was a place of childhood joy, a home where rules were softer, and where their grandmother's gentle kindness made everyone feel safe. During this golden period, Royal Lodge wasn't just a royal home. It was the beating heart of a family, the fall of a mansion. Prince Andrew, money, and scandal. When the Queen Mother passed away in 2002, the world mourned the loss of one of Britain's most beloved royals. She had lived a long and remarkable life, full of charm, strength, and grace. But her death also left behind a question. What would happen to her cherished home, Royal Lodge? For 50 years it had been her sanctuary. Every corner of the mansion carried her touch. The furniture, the paintings, the gardens she had personally helped design. For many, Royal Lodge wasn't just property. It was a living piece of her story. But now, it stood empty, waiting for its next chapter. Prince Andrew's lease. That next chapter began in 2003, when Prince Andrew, the Queen Mother's grandson and the second son of Queen Elizabeth II, was granted a 75-year lease on Royal Lodge. At first, the deal seemed fair. The Duke of York paid $1 million up front, plus agreed to spend $7.5 million on repairs and renovations. For a home that had seen decades of aging, it was a necessary investment. The deal meant Andrew could live there for most of his life, and even beyond, as long as he maintained the property. To many in the public, this sounded like a royal success story. Here was a prince stepping up to take care of a historic home, continuing his grandmother's legacy. Newspapers even praised him for preserving the Queen Mother's memory. But the truth was more complicated, and much darker. Behind the beautiful gates and tidy lawns, problems were already beginning to grow. The cost of maintaining the house was enormous. The roof leaked, the foundations needed repairs, and the once perfect gardens were slipping into wild disorder. It wasn't long before the costs spiraled far beyond what anyone expected. Experts estimated that keeping Royal Lodge in good shape would cost $4 to $5 million each year, a shocking figure, even for royalty. The mystery of the money. Soon, people began asking a question that has never been fully answered. Where was all this money coming from? After all, Prince Andrew's official royal allowance had been cut. He was no longer a working royal, and therefore, he no longer received the same public funding as before. Yet somehow, the mansion's staff were still being paid. Repairs continued. The security guards were still there. The lawns were still trimmed. The lights at Royal Lodge stayed on. Some suspected that Andrew was using his savings. Others believed money might have come from private deals or business connections that were never made public. Then came an even more controversial theory, that funds were linked to foreign businessmen who had once been close to him. One case stood out. Prince Andrew's former home, Sunninghill Park, had been sold in 2007 to Timur Kulibayev, a Kazakh billionaire and the son-in-law of Kazakhstan's president. The sale raised eyebrows immediately because it went for $3 million above the asking price, an unusually generous amount. To this day, no one fully understands why that deal happened or why the buyer paid so much. For critics, it was just one more clue in the growing mystery of Royal Lodge's secret finances. Sarah Ferguson returns. In 2008, another twist added to the story. Sarah Ferguson, Prince Andrew's ex-wife, moved back into Royal Lodge. Even though they divorced in 1996, she returned to live with him under the same roof. Her own home, Drumlin House, had been damaged by fire, and Royal Lodge became her refuge. At first, many assumed it was temporary, but as months turned into years, it became clear that this was a permanent arrangement. The world was fascinated. The tabloids had a field day with headlines like, "The Duke and his Duchess together again?" But there was no romantic reunion, at least not officially. Instead, they described themselves as best friends and co-parents to their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. Still, it raised a simple question. Why live together after divorce? Some royal experts said it was emotional, that they had remained close and supportive of each other. Others believed it was financial. Sharing the house might have made it easier to manage costs. But a few saw a deeper motive, that Sarah's presence helped Andrew strengthen his claim to the property, making it even harder for anyone to push him out. Whatever the truth, the arrangement only deepened the sense of mystery surrounding the mansion. Behind its crumbling walls, Royal Lodge had become both a home and a fortress. A house in trouble. While the Duke and Duchess carried on with their unusual living situation, the mansion itself was falling apart. The grand drawing room, once filled with laughter during the Queen Mother's famous parties, now looked tired and worn. The ceilings had cracks wide enough for engineers to worry, paint peeled from the walls, revealing old plaster beneath. In some rooms, black mold crept slowly along the corners, a dark symbol of neglect. The gardens, once the pride of the Queen Mother, became wild and overgrown. Weeds choked the flower beds and moss covered the statues that had once gleamed in the sun. Landscape historians described it as shocking, even impossible to rescue without major investment. What was once a paradise had become a ghost of its former beauty. Even the Royal Chapel of All Saints, standing nearby since 1825, couldn't escape the feeling of decline. The whole estate seemed to be aging faster than ever, as if reflecting the troubles of the family living inside. A king's displeasure. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away in 2022, her eldest son became King Charles III. From the start, King Charles made it clear that he wanted to reshape the monarchy. His plan was to create what he called a slimmed-down monarchy, a smaller, more modern royal family that would cost less and appear more in touch with ordinary citizens. That meant fewer working royals and less financial waste. For Prince Andrew, this was bad news. His royal duties had already ended years earlier after scandals damaged his reputation. Now, his royal allowance, roughly $1 million per year, plus $3 million for security, was being cut entirely. King Charles wanted him to move into a smaller property, such as Frogmore Cottage, the former home of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. But Andrew refused. His 75-year lease on Royal Lodge gave him the legal right to stay until 2078, and he was determined to hold his ground. The result was what the media called the Siege of Royal Lodge. Behind palace doors, tensions grew. On one side stood the king, trying to protect the image of the monarchy. On the other stood his brother, refusing to give up the estate he saw as his rightful home. The legal battle no one wanted. The situation was more than just a family argument. It was a legal nightmare. Because of the lease, King Charles III couldn't simply evict Prince Andrew. The only way to force him out would be if he failed to maintain the property properly, breaking the terms of the lease. And so began a quiet but fierce power struggle. The king's advisors started hinting publicly that Royal Lodge was falling apart, hoping to pressure Andrew to leave voluntarily. Royal sources told the press that the mansion's declining condition could become a serious concern. At the same time, Andrew's supporters insisted he was fulfilling his responsibilities, keeping the property in acceptable shape. But the cracks, both literal and symbolic, continued to grow. Behind every news headline, the same question echoed: how long can this go on? The Queen's corgis. In the middle of all this drama, Prince Andrew made one move that softened public opinion, at least a little. After Queen Elizabeth II's death, he became caretaker of her two beloved corgis, Muek and Sandy. The dogs now live with him at Royal Lodge, playing on the same lawns their late owner once walked on daily. To some, this seemed touching, a son keeping his mother's pets safe in her memory. But to others, it was a clever emotional strategy. Evicting Andrew from Royal Lodge would also mean uprooting the Queen's dogs, a decision few would want to make. Whether sentimental or strategic, it gave the Duke another reason to stay put: family ties and public judgment. For Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, the situation is painful. They grew up at Royal Lodge. It's where they learned to ride bikes, celebrated birthdays, and spent family holidays with their grandmother. To them, the mansion isn't just a royal estate, it's home. They've both tried to stay out of the controversy, but they've also defended their father, describing him as a loving parent and insisting that he deserves peace. Yet, public opinion is divided. To some, Prince Andrew is a man clinging to privilege he no longer deserves. To others, he's a royal outcast, unfairly treated by a system that once adored him. Inside the palace, the standoff continues. Outside, the British public watches, fascinated, frustrated, and curious about what will happen next. A symbol of a struggling monarchy. Today, Royal Lodge is more than a decaying mansion. It's a symbol. Its cracked walls and unkept gardens reflect a royal family struggling to adapt to modern expectations. In a world that demands transparency and accountability, the idea of a disgraced prince living in a taxpayer-linked mansion worth tens of millions feels outdated and uncomfortable. Even so, Prince Andrew remains inside, behind those heavy gates and guarded fences, surrounded by memories of better times. Every day, King Charles III can see the estate from Windsor Castle, just 3 miles away, a constant reminder of his brother's defiance. For now, the stalemate continues. Royal Lodge stands silent and stubborn, its windows dark at night, its history heavy with whispers. But one question remains: how long can a house so filled with secrets, money, and royal pride survive before it collapses under its own weight? The clock is ticking. Time, like the weather, is slowly eroding Royal Lodge. Rainwater continues to seep into the bricks. Windows rattle in their frames. The once grand entrance now feels more like a shadow of the past than a welcome to the future. But Prince Andrew seems unmoved. He's still there, walking his dogs, reading newspapers, and waving to security guards, as though the outside world no longer exists. Behind the calm exterior, though, the pressure is building. Royal insiders say King Charles has discussed the matter repeatedly with advisors. They explore options, legal, financial, and even personal, to resolve the standoff. But each time, they come to the same conclusion. As long as the lease stands, their hands are tied. The future of Royal Lodge now depends not on laws or repairs, but on time itself. Will the Duke's finances run out? Will the structure collapse? Or will the King's patience finally break? No one knows, but the longer the silence lasts, the louder the questions grow. Royal Lodge and the modern monarchy. Secrets, symbolism, and scandal. From above, Royal Lodge still looks majestic. A cream-colored mansion nestled between ancient oaks, its wide lawns glowing green under the English sun. But from the ground, it feels different. The walls tell stories, not just of kings and queens, but of secrets, stubbornness, and a royal family at war with time itself. A mansion. Under a microscope. In the old days, royal homes were private worlds. No one outside the palace knew what happened within their walls. But in today's world of smartphones, drones, and social media, nothing stays hidden. Every renovation, every rumor, and every leak from Royal Lodge becomes a headline by morning. For King Charles III, this is a nightmare. He knows that in the 21st century, reputation is everything. The British public wants the monarchy to feel responsible, modern, and open, not secretive and entitled. So, when newspapers publish photos of peeling paint and sagging roofs at Royal Lodge, paired with stories of millions mysteriously being spent, it feels like an insult to everything he's trying to build. Meanwhile, Prince Andrew treats the mansion as his personal fortress. To him, Royal Lodge is not a symbol of scandal, but of loyalty, a piece of his mother's world that he refuses to surrender. In his mind, giving it up would mean giving up part of Queen Elizabeth II's legacy, and part of himself, the brother versus brother. Tension. Behind palace walls, the relationship between King Charles and Prince Andrew is said to be distant and tense. The brothers once shared a warm bond, laughing together at family gatherings. But as the years passed, their paths diverged, Charles stepping into duty and destiny, Andrew stepping into controversy. Insiders say the king has offered gentle warnings. He's explained that public perception matters, that every photograph of Royal Lodge sends the wrong message to taxpayers who struggle to afford homes of their own. But Andrew, ever proud, pushes back. He reminds everyone that he paid for his lease legally, that he spent millions restoring the house, and that he has every right to stay. To him, this isn't just about property. It's about dignity, about not being erased. Some royal observers compare the feud to a chess match. Both men are bound by rules, the king's authority versus the duke's contract. Neither can make the winning move without risking public backlash. So the game drags on year after year, while the mansion decays like a monument to their standoff. The public perception crisis. The British press has not been kind. Headlines often call Royal Lodge Britain's most expensive mystery, or the house that won't be fixed. Television specials have shown images of the estate's crumbling walls next to graphics of its staggering upkeep costs. Social media users comment with disbelief that one house could swallow so much money while hospitals and schools face cuts. Every scandal involving Prince Andrew, from his controversial friendships to his withdrawal from public duties, feeds the same perception that Royal Lodge is a symbol of privilege out of control. For critics of the monarchy, it has become an easy target, proof that the royal system still protects its own, even when the world demands accountability. Inside the family, this pressure is felt deeply. King Charles III is said to be frustrated that no matter how much he modernizes other parts of the monarchy, stories about Royal Lodge always pull the institution back into the past. Echoes of history, a house that always costs too much. Ironically, this isn't the first time Royal Lodge has been accused of being too expensive. From the days of John Nash's 1812 redesign, the estate has had a reputation for draining royal finances. Each new generation has poured money into it, hoping to make it perfect, only to discover that the house always demands more. King William IV once called the early renovations a foolish waste. A century later, critics complained when public funds helped repair it for the Queen Mother. Now, history repeats itself once again with Prince Andrew. The names change, but the argument remains the same. How much is too much for tradition? Perhaps that is the curse of Royal Lodge, a place built not just of stone, but of royal pride. Every attempt to save it turns into a mirror reflecting the monarchy's ongoing struggle between image and identity. Inside the overgrown gardens, walk through the once famous gardens today, and you can still sense their former beauty. Wild roses twist around iron gates, old fountains whisper under layers of moss. Here and there, faded stone statues peek out from the ivy, as if remembering the laughter of children who played there long ago. These gardens were the pride of the Queen Mother. She spent decades tending them, planting flowers to bloom in every season. She knew the gardeners by name and often walked with them at dawn, discussing which roses had survived the frost. Under her care, Royal Lodge felt alive, a perfect blend of nature and nobility. Now, the overgrowth feels symbolic. It mirrors the state of the house itself, something once glorious, now fading. Even the most romantic corners of the estate seem haunted by time. To visitors, it feels as if the past is trying to speak, reminding everyone that beauty without care cannot survive forever. The business of royal property. To understand why the situation at Royal Lodge matters so much, it helps to understand how royal properties actually work. Most are not owned personally by the royals, but by the Crown Estate, a vast organization that manages billions of pounds in land and buildings for the country. When a royal lives in one of these homes, they usually do so under a lease or as part of their official duties. That means the rules are strict. The person leasing the property, in this case Prince Andrew, must keep it in good condition. If the house falls into serious disrepair, the Crown Estate could technically reclaim it. This gives King Charles an indirect advantage. If the Duke cannot afford repairs, he risks losing the home altogether. This delicate balance of law and family loyalty makes the Royal Lodge saga even more dramatic. It's not just a private argument between brothers, it's also a legal puzzle involving contracts, money, and national property. The monarchy in the modern age. As Britain changes, so too must its monarchy. Younger generations, raised in the digital era, view the royal family differently than before. They want openness, responsibility, and proof that the royals live by the same rules as everyone else. For them, stories like Royal Lodge feel outdated, a reminder of privilege that no longer fits a modern world. Polls show that public support for the monarchy remains strong, but it is not guaranteed. Every new scandal, every unanswered question chips away at trust. Even people who love the royal family find it hard to defend a situation where millions vanish into an old house that most will never see. That is why King Charles III feels urgency. He knows his reign will be judged not just by ceremonies or speeches, but by actions, by whether he can make the monarchy seem fair, responsible, and worth keeping. And as long as Royal Lodge stands as a reminder of excess, that goal remains out of reach. A glimpse of compassion. Yet, amid the anger and politics, there are moments of quiet humanity. Those close to Prince Andrew say he feels deep sadness about how his life has changed. Once celebrated as a war hero and royal favorite, he now lives mostly in isolation. Sarah Ferguson, despite everything, remains loyal. She often speaks publicly about forgiveness and resilience, describing their shared home as a safe haven. Neighbors sometimes see her walking the corgis or chatting with staff. She decorates the house for Christmas, hosting small family gatherings away from the cameras. Whatever the world thinks of them, inside those walls, there is still family, still small pockets of warmth. And perhaps that is why Royal Lodge continues to capture the public imagination. It's not just about scandal, it's about people, flawed, proud, emotional, trying to hold on to something that once defined them. The global spotlight. Internationally, Royal Lodge has become a fascination. Documentaries, tabloid exposés, and news articles around the world replay the same questions. Will Prince Andrew be forced out? Who pays for the repairs? What does this mean for the future of the monarchy? Every photograph taken through the iron gates, whether it's a gardener trimming weeds or a royal car leaving the driveway, feeds this endless story. Foreign audiences, especially in the United States, treat it like a real-life drama, full of mystery and family tension. For them, the British monarchy is part fairy tale, part soap opera, and Royal Lodge is one of its most intriguing sets. The weight of legacy. Sometimes history repeats itself, not because people forget, but because they can't let go. In many ways, Prince Andrew is trapped, not just by his lease, but by memory. He grew up in a world where royal privilege felt eternal, where castles and titles seemed unshakable. Now he lives in a time when everything, even royalty, is questioned. Royal Lodge reflects that shift. It stands between two worlds, the old and the new, the secretive and the transparent. Each cracked ceiling and faded portrait is a reminder that nothing lasts forever, not even the illusion of endless power. Still, there is something undeniably human about it. A man refusing to leave the home where his grandmother once smiled, where his daughters once played, where his mother's corgis now sleep by the fire. For all its controversy, Royal Lodge is also a story of attachment, of a person holding on to the last piece of a fading past. The choice ahead. As the years pass, the king's patience thins, and the repairs grow more urgent. Eventually, a choice will have to be made. Either Prince Andrew finds the money to save the house, or King Charles finds the courage to take it back. Royal insiders whisper that plans are being quietly drawn. Some suggest turning Royal Lodge into a public venue, perhaps a museum or luxury retreat that earns money for the crown estate. Others think it will eventually be given to another working royal, maybe Prince William or Princess Charlotte, decades from now. But no decision will be easy. Every option risks controversy. For now, the standoff continues, and the mansion waits, caught between memory and destiny. The fate of Royal Lodge. Will it stand or fall? The story of Royal Lodge isn't just about one man or one mansion. It's about the survival of a symbol, a battle between old traditions and new expectations. And as time marches on, the question becomes impossible to ignore. What will happen to this house that refuses to let go of its past? A legacy. On borrowed time, every brick of Royal Lodge holds a memory. The laughter of Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret echoes faintly in the gardens where they once played. The soft perfume of the Queen Mother's roses still lingers near the conservatory she loved so dearly. Even the old chapel bells, rusted and weathered, seem to hum with the ghosts of royal history. But memory doesn't pay bills, and nostalgia can't stop decay. Without constant care, the roof leaks, the wood rots, and the gardens slip further into wilderness. The mansion that once represented royal grace now teeters between beauty and ruin. Experts say that in just a few more decades, if nothing changes, Royal Lodge could be beyond repair. And with its 75-year lease ticking away, Prince Andrew may be the last royal to ever live there. The weight of money and reputation. For King Charles III, the question isn't just emotional, it's financial. He knows that every pound spent on Royal Lodge draws attention. In an age where British taxpayers want transparency, even the smallest royal expense becomes a headline. Critics argue that the monarchy should sell underused properties, cut costs, and prove that it deserves to exist in modern Britain. Supporters say that heritage can't be measured in money, that homes like Royal Lodge tell Britain's story and must be preserved. But preservation comes at a price, and with Prince Andrew no longer performing royal duties, his presence there feels increasingly awkward. To many Britons, he represents the old world, one of privilege without accountability. For King Charles, keeping his brother in that mansion risks damaging the very reputation he's trying to rebuild. So, the king faces an impossible choice: protect his family or protect the crown. A mansion of mixed meanings. Royal Lodge has become a paradox, a house loved and loathed at the same time. To royal historians, it's a priceless piece of heritage. To taxpayers, it's a burden. To the media, it's a mystery. And to Prince Andrew, it's home, the one place where he still feels like part of the royal world. Every window reflects those conflicting truths. The polished antiques inside remind visitors of royal elegance, while the cracked plaster above them whispers of decline. The lawns look peaceful from afar, but up close, they reveal patches of neglect, a perfect metaphor for the monarchy itself. This duality, beauty and decay, privilege and struggle, is what makes Royal Lodge so haunting. It's not just a building, it's a mirror, the uncertain future. Royal advisors have discussed many possible futures for Royal Lodge. One plan suggests turning it into a public residence or luxury retreat to fund its own upkeep. Another proposes moving a younger royal family member in someday, perhaps Prince William's children when they come of age. There's even talk of opening parts of the estate for public tours, like Frogmore House, to reconnect it with the people. But none of these ideas can happen while Prince Andrew remains under his lease. His contract protects him, legally, but not emotionally. Every year he stays, the tension with his brother grows stronger. And with the mansion's condition worsening, the king's patience may one day reach its limit. Sources inside the palace say quiet discussions have already begun about what could happen when the time comes. Whether that means a buyout, a court order, or a quiet family deal, no one yet knows. The house as a symbol of change. Throughout British history, great houses have risen and fallen, symbols of power that eventually gave way to modern times. Places like Harbour Hill, Hamilton Palace, and Mentmore Towers once represented wealth beyond imagination. But as fortunes faded, those estates were abandoned, demolished, or sold off to pay debts. Now, many wonder if Royal Lodge will suffer the same fate. The difference is that this isn't just a rich man's home, it's a royal one. Its fall would symbolize something greater, the end of an era where the monarchy could live apart from the people it served. Its survival, on the other hand, could prove that history can adapt, that tradition and progress can coexist. And so, Royal Lodge stands at a crossroads. Every vine creeping up its walls, every raindrop slipping through its roof, every argument whispered between two royal brothers. All are signs of a monarchy in transformation. The quiet companionship of the corgis. Meanwhile, behind the iron gates, life at Royal Lodge carries on in small, ordinary ways. Sarah Ferguson continues to write books and attend charity events. The corgis, Muke and Sandy, wander the lawns, chasing butterflies in the same gardens once walked by Queen Elizabeth II. Neighbors sometimes catch glimpses of Prince Andrew driving through the estate, waving politely as he passes the guards. To the world, he is a man surrounded by scandal. But at home, he's simply a son, a father, and a man trying to hold on to the last bit of stability he has left. Maybe that's the real heart of this story. Not power or politics, but the human desire to belong somewhere, even when everything else fades. The spirit of the Queen Mother. If the walls of Royal Lodge could speak, they would remember the Queen Mother's laughter, her kindness, and her deep love for the place. She once said that a house, no matter how grand, means nothing without warmth and family. For decades, she gave that warmth freely to her guests, her staff, and her grandchildren. Now, her spirit lingers in the silence. Some say you can almost feel it. A gentle presence that watches over the estate, saddened by its decline, but proud of its legacy. Perhaps she would have wanted her grandsons to find peace, to remember that family comes before property, and that love endures longer than any lease. The final reflection. As dusk settles over Windsor Great Park, the last rays of sunlight touch the old stone walls of Royal Lodge. From afar, it still looks magnificent, golden and timeless, surrounded by fields and ancient oaks. But up close, you can see the cracks, the wear, the signs of time's quiet victory. The story of Royal Lodge is not just about a house. It's about what happens when history and humanity collide, when royal blood meets real-world consequences. It's the story of a monarchy trying to modernize without losing its soul. It's the story of a brother who won't give up his home, even when the world turns against him. And it's the story of a building that refuses to die, because it carries the memories of generations who shaped Britain's history. In the end, Royal Lodge remains both beautiful and broken, a symbol of the British monarchy itself, grand, flawed, proud, and enduring. Whether it stands another century or falls into dust, its legacy will outlive its walls. Because Royal Lodge isn't just part of royal history, it is royal history. When people hear the name Onassis, they often imagine glittering yachts, glamorous parties, and the kind of wealth that could buy entire islands. But behind the fortune, behind the dazzling headlines and the whispers of high society, lies a story told not only through the people, but through the homes they built, bought, and loved. These homes weren't just places to sleep or escape. They were symbols, reflections of taste, ambition, heartbreak, and legacy. From the shining waters of the Ionian Sea to the heart of Manhattan, the Onassis family mansions tell a story of old money luxury, personal triumphs, and private sorrow. So, let's step inside the world of Aristotle Onassis and Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and explore how their mansions became monuments to love, loss, and legacy. The world of Aristotle. Onassis. To understand the mansions, we have to understand the man who built the empire behind them. Aristotle Socrates Onassis. Born in 1906 in Smyrna, modern-day Izmir, Turkey, Aristotle came from humble beginnings. His father, Socrates Onassis, was a prosperous shipping trader, but when the Greco-Turkish War broke out, everything changed. The Onassis family lost nearly all they owned. As refugees, they fled to Greece, leaving behind their home, their wealth, and their old life. But Aristotle, even as a young man, wasn't someone who gave up. He left for Argentina in his early 20s, working odd jobs before he found his way into the world of shipping and trade. By the 1940s, he had turned himself into one of the richest and most powerful men in the world. He didn't just want money, he wanted status. And for Aristotle, Onassis' real status came from how you lived, the properties you owned, the parties you threw, and the people you entertained. Jackie's second chapter. When Jacqueline Kennedy, the widowed First Lady of the United States, married Aristotle Onassis in 1968, the world gasped. To some, she was running from tragedy. To others, she was stepping into a new life of unmatched wealth and privacy. But to Jackie, it was both. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy had left her heartbroken and haunted by constant media attention. With Aristotle, she saw a way to protect her children, Caroline and John Jr., and reclaim a sense of peace. And Aristotle, ever the showman, found in Jackie the one thing even his billions couldn't buy: royalty by association. Their life together unfolded across an extraordinary backdrop of luxury, from London's Mayfair to the Greek Isles, from private yachts to quiet countryside retreats. Each place told a piece of their story. 47 Grosvenor Square, London's elegant escape. Our first stop is at 47 Grosvenor Square, a stately address in London's exclusive Mayfair district, a neighborhood where wealth whispers, never shouts. In the 1960s, this building was already famous. It had once been home to Sir John Anderson, a prominent British official and close ally of Winston Churchill. But when Aristotle Onassis purchased the first-floor apartment, he transformed it into something extraordinary. The apartment stretched over 5,000 square feet, with 5 bedrooms, 3 reception rooms, and a sprawling library. It wasn't just large, it was grand. High ceilings framed by intricate plasterwork, marble fireplaces, and tall sash windows flooded the rooms with soft London light. Aristotle used this space not only as a residence, but as a social hub. It became the London headquarters of the Onassis lifestyle, a meeting place for aristocrats, politicians, artists, and celebrities. But the apartment also served a more personal purpose. It was a home base for Aristotle's sister, Artemis, and later a favorite stop for Jackie Kennedy Onassis and her daughter Caroline, who studied in London during that time. A stage for the elite. When Jackie visited, 47 Grosvenor Square would come alive. The drawing rooms shimmered with crystal, the air perfumed by fresh flowers flown in from Paris, and the quiet hum of conversation filled the halls. Guests included Lee Radziwill, Jackie's elegant sister, and members of the British upper class who were curious to glimpse the woman who had once been America's First Lady. The home's crown jewel was its 63-foot balcony, the only one in the entire Georgian block with such a commanding view over the square. On summer evenings, it served as the perfect spot for cocktails and conversation as the lights of London twinkled below. Inside, the design was tasteful but never loud, a blend of Greek elegance and European refinement. Aristotle preferred bold textures, deep colors, and statement pieces. Jackie, on the other hand, had a gentler eye, soft pastels, symmetry, and timeless furniture that spoke of quiet grace rather than extravagance. Together, their styles merged into something unique, sophisticated, powerful, but deeply personal. The apartment's later life. After Aristotle Onassis's death in 1975, the apartment changed hands. It was later purchased by Edmond Safra, a famous Lebanese banker known for his wealth and philanthropy. Safra and his wife Lily continued the apartment's legacy of grandeur, hosting lavish balls reminiscent of the Onassis era. At one 1988 event, the guest list included politicians, royals, and film stars, a gathering that felt like a page torn from the past. Even after tragedy struck when Edmond Safra died in a mysterious fire in 1999, Lily Safra preserved the apartment's splendor. Today, 47 Grosvenor Square remains a symbol of London's high society, a reminder of the days when the world's most powerful people walked through its doors. The symbolism of Grosvenor Square. But beyond the luxury, this London mansion reflected something deeper about Aristotle Onassis and Jackie. It represented a kind of balance between Europe and America, old money, and a new fame, tradition, and modernity. Jackie, with her impeccable taste, felt at home in London's restrained elegance. Aristotle, ever the cosmopolitan businessman, loved being at the center of global power. And Mayfair was the perfect place for that. Here, away from the flashbulbs of New York and the chaos of Athens, they could play their roles as the world's most glamorous couple in peace, at least for a little while. A glimpse into their private world. Those who visited described the apartment not as a palace, but as a place of comfort wrapped in sophistication. The library shelves were lined with rare books, Aristotle's passion, and the bar, polished to perfection, was always ready for guests. Jackie would sit by the window, tea in hand, overlooking the square while her daughter studied nearby. It was a rare glimpse of quiet in a life that had been anything but. In many ways, 47 Grosvenor Square captured the essence of the Onassis lifestyle. Controlled elegance, hidden drama, and a deep awareness that beauty could be both a shield and a stage. From London to New York, but even as London offered a sophisticated retreat, Jackie's heart remained in New York City, a place that represented independence, memory, and a return to her roots. After the heartbreak of losing President Kennedy, she had chosen a home not for its grandeur, but for its familiarity and safety. And that home became one of Manhattan's most iconic addresses. That's where we'll go next. Jackie's New York sanctuary, 1040 Fifth Avenue. After the tragedy of President John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963, Jacqueline Kennedy found herself living in a world that no longer felt safe. The crowds, the cameras, and the endless questions never stopped. Every street corner, every newspaper headline reminded her of what she had lost. So, in 1964, searching for stability and comfort, Jackie Kennedy made one of the most important purchases of her life. A 15-room apartment on the 15th floor of 1040 Fifth Avenue, overlooking Central Park in Manhattan. It wasn't just another luxury residence. For Jackie, it was a refuge, a place where she could raise her children and rebuild her life away from the noise of Washington and the shadows of the White House. A home with history. The building at 1040 Fifth Avenue wasn't new, but it was legendary. Designed by Rosario Candela in 1930, it was one of the finest examples of classic New York architecture. Stately, elegant, and understated. Candela's work defined the golden age of Manhattan apartment living, and his buildings were known for their gracious proportions, high ceilings, and intelligent layouts. Unlike the glass towers that would later dominate the skyline, 1040 Fifth Avenue had character. Its limestone facade stood proud yet simple, with carved details and a canopied entrance that exuded old-world charm. Inside, wide hallways, polished marble floors, and brass accents gave the place a quiet dignity that whispered, not shouted, wealth. There were only 27 apartments in the entire building, each designed to feel like a mansion, floating high above the city. Privacy was paramount, and for Jackie, that was priceless. Inside Jackie's apartment, Jackie's penthouse was a full-floor residence, offering sweeping views of Central Park and the reservoir that would later be renamed in her honor, the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. It was a view that defined serenity. Each morning, the sunlight danced across the treetops and filled the rooms with golden light. In the evenings, the city glowed below like a sea of stars. The apartment itself was refined, warm, and deeply personal. Nancy Tuckerman, one of Jackie's closest friends, once said that the space felt like her, welcoming, intelligent, and quietly beautiful. Jackie never chased extravagance. She preferred timeless beauty over opulence. Her living room, filled with soft colors and comfortable furniture, radiated calm. There were family photos, books stacked neatly on tables, and delicate artworks that spoke of her love for culture and history. Much of the furniture had followed her from her White House days, pieces that carried the memories of another life. The famous portrait of President Kennedy hung in a place of honor, surrounded by fresh flowers and sunlight. Candela's design genius. Rosario. Candela had a gift for designing apartments that felt both grand and intimate. Each unit in 1040 Fifth Avenue had a large entrance gallery, often with black and white marble flooring, that opened into a series of elegant rooms, the living room, library, and dining room, each with its own fireplace. In Jackie's home, those fireplaces became emotional anchors. She would often spend quiet evenings reading by the fire, while her children, Caroline and John Jr., played or studied nearby. The crackle of wood, the warmth of the flames, and the familiar scent of old books made the apartment feel alive. Behind the main living areas, the floor plan opened into a kitchen and staff quarters, including a maid's room and pantry. The apartment also included 4 or 5 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom and walk-in closets large enough to hold Jackie's famed wardrobe. Though she was known for her simplicity more than her size of closet, everything about the apartment reflected her desire for balance, luxury with restraint, comfort with sophistication. A place for healing. When Jackie first moved into 1040 Fifth Avenue, she was still in deep mourning. The apartment offered her a place to grieve privately, away from the flashing cameras and headlines. It became her fortress and her cocoon. Neighbors often saw her walking quietly through Central Park, sometimes with Caroline and John Jr., other times alone, wrapped in her thoughts. In those moments, she was no longer the First Lady, no longer a symbol. She was simply a mother and a woman trying to heal. Inside the apartment, she surrounded herself with books, music, and art. Her library overflowed with volumes on history, literature, and design. She found solace in words and beauty, the same things that had comforted her throughout her life. Friends said that she filled the apartment with warmth, not grandeur. The decor rarely changed. Even when fabrics wore thin, she replaced them with identical patterns, preferring continuity over novelty. To Jackie, beauty wasn't about showing off. It was about creating peace. Live after Aristotle. In 1968, Jackie Kennedy shocked the world again when she married Aristotle Onassis, one of the richest men alive. The public's reaction was mixed. Some admired her courage to move forward, while others criticized her for marrying into immense wealth. But for Jackie, this was about security, both emotional and financial. After years of living under the microscope, she wanted a life where she and her children could be safe, and Aristotle Onassis offered that promise. During their marriage, Jackie spent part of her time in Greece aboard Onassis's private yacht, the Christina O, and on his private island, Scorpios. But no matter where she traveled, her heart remained anchored in New York. 1040. Fifth Avenue was her true home, her constant through all the changes. When Aristotle Onassis died in 1975, Jackie once again faced profound loss. Yet, she didn't retreat this time. Instead, she began a new chapter, Jackie the Editor. In the years following Onassis's death, Jackie reinvented herself in a way no one expected. She became a book editor. In 1975, she joined Viking Press and later moved to Doubleday as a senior editor. It wasn't a vanity job. Jackie was deeply passionate about literature and believed in the power of storytelling. Colleagues described her as dedicated and meticulous, editing manuscripts late into the night from her apartment on Fifth Avenue. She worked on books about history, art, and culture, subjects that reflected her own interests. Her apartment became not just a home, but a workspace, where she could nurture creativity and find meaning beyond fame. For the first time in decades, she was living life on her own terms, quietly, purposefully, and surrounded by the people and things she loved. A final goodbye. When Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis passed away in 1994, the apartment at 1040 Fifth Avenue became a place of pilgrimage for admirers and mourners. Crowds gathered outside the building, leaving flowers and notes beneath its canopied entrance. It was a touching reminder of how deeply she had touched the world. In 1995, the apartment was sold to billionaire David Koch for $9.5 million, a sum that, at the time, reflected both its prime location and its history. Over the years, the property changed hands several times, its value soaring as it continued to be one of Manhattan's most desirable addresses. But for those who remember Jackie, the building remains more than real estate. It's a symbol of grace under pressure, of quiet resilience, and of the way one woman transformed unimaginable tragedy into a legacy of strength and beauty. A legacy in limestone. Even today, if you walk down Fifth Avenue and look up at the limestone facade of 1040, you can almost imagine her there, standing by the window, gazing over Central Park, the city's lights reflected in her eyes. The apartment stands as a lasting reminder of a life that bridged two worlds, the public and the private, the powerful and the personal. It tells a story not just of wealth or fame, but of endurance, taste, and dignity. In a world obsessed with spectacle, Jackie Kennedy Onassis found peace in simplicity, and that, perhaps, was her greatest luxury of all. Scorpios Island, the billionaire's private paradise. If there was ever a place that captured the myth and mystery of Aristotle Onassis, it was Scorpios Island. Set in the glittering Ionian Sea, this lush private paradise became one of the most famous symbols of wealth and romance the world has ever seen. But when Aristotle Onassis first set eyes on it in 1963, Scorpios wasn't the green jewel it would one day become. It was a barren piece of land, dusty and dry, surrounded by turquoise waters, unremarkable to anyone but him. Where others saw wilderness, Onassis saw potential. He envisioned not just a retreat, but a kingdom, a world entirely his own, the birth of a dream. That year, Aristotle Onassis bought the island for what now seems like an unbelievable bargain, about 3.5 million drachmas, or roughly $114,000 in today's money. For most people, even a single yacht or London apartment would have been enough. But for Onassis, Scorpios would be the crown jewel of his empire. He poured his heart, and millions of dollars, into transforming it. Over the next few years, ships arrived carrying hundreds of trees, tons of soil, and sand from the island of Salamina to create golden beaches. Onassis didn't just want to own nature, he wanted to reshape it. Soon Scorpios bloomed into a tropical paradise. He built 3 villas, a helipad, a private marina, and luxurious guest houses. Every path, every garden, every hidden corner was designed for privacy and perfection. The Pink House and Jackie's Escape, At the heart of this island, paradise stood a special home, the Pink House. Painted in soft rose tones that glowed under the Greek sun, it was built for Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis after their marriage in 1968. For Jackie, this island was a world away from the flashing cameras and chaos of New York. Here, she could finally breathe. She would walk along the beaches in wide-brimmed hats, barefoot, collecting shells with John Jr. and Caroline. The sea breeze, the silence, and the sense of isolation made Scorpios a sanctuary. But even paradise wasn't safe from the world's curiosity. In 1971, Jackie's peace was shattered when paparazzi managed to photograph her sunbathing nude on one of Scorpios' beaches, a deeply humiliating invasion of privacy that made global headlines. The incident revealed the dark side of her fame. Even surrounded by the sea, she couldn't truly escape the public eye. The wedding that stunned the world. 5 years earlier, in October 1968, Scorpios had already made history when Jackie Kennedy married Aristotle Onassis in a small ceremony on the island. It was one of the most talked about weddings of the 20th century. Only about 40 guests were invited, including Jackie's sister, Lee Radziwill, Onassis' children, Alexander and Christina, and a handful of close friends and dignitaries. The ceremony took place at the island's tiny Greek Orthodox chapel, decorated with white lilies and candles. The sound of waves replaced music, and the soft wind from the sea carried their vows across the island. For the press, it was a shock. The widow of an American president, marrying a Greek shipping magnate. For some, it felt like a fairy tale. For others, a betrayal of Camelot's dream. But for Jackie, it was simply a chance at peace. And for Aristotle, it was a conquest of the heart, as grand as any of his business triumphs. Scorpios, the playground of the elite. In the years that followed, Scorpios became the most exclusive destination in the world. Its guest lists read like a roll call of mid-century royalty. Winston Churchill, Mariah Callas, Frank Sinatra, Grace Kelly, John F. Kennedy Jr., and countless European aristocrats all walked its shores. The days on Scorpios were filled with sunlight, laughter, and fine wine. Nights brought candlelit dinners, live music, and the sound of the sea brushing the sand. Onassis would host lavish feasts under the stars, his yacht Christina O anchored nearby, its lights shimmering across the water. It was more than luxury. It was legend. Scorpios wasn't just a place to visit. It was a place to be seen. And in those years, no one embodied glamour quite like Aristotle and Jackie Onassis. A paradise with shadows. But beneath the glitter, there were cracks. Aristotle Onassis' health began to decline, and tragedy struck when his beloved son, Alexander, died in a plane crash in 1973. The loss shattered him. The man who had conquered oceans and empires suddenly seemed lost. He spent his final years on Scorpios, weakened and heartbroken, staring out at the waters that had once symbolized freedom. When he died in 1975, he was buried on the island he loved so deeply, next to his son. Later, his daughter Christina Onassis would also be laid to rest there, her life cut short by illness and sorrow. What began as a dream of paradise had become a private cemetery, a silent reminder that not even the richest man alive could buy happiness. A new era, from Onassis to Athena. After Aristotle's death, Scorpios passed to his daughter Christina, and then to his granddaughter, Athena Onassis Roussel, the last surviving heir of the Onassis fortune. But for Athena, the island carried too much history, too much sadness. She rarely visited, and in 2013, she made the decision to sell Scorpios to Russian billionaire Dmitry Rybolovlev for an estimated $153 million. With that sale, a chapter of history closed. For the first time in 50 years, Scorpios no longer belonged to the Onassis name. The modern transformation, Dmitry Rybolovlev, a man whose wealth rivaled that of Onassis himself, saw in Scorpios what Aristotle once had: potential. He announced ambitious plans to transform the island into a luxury eco-resort for the modern elite, investing over $200 million into its rebirth. Designed by the renowned Norwegian firm Snohetta, the same architects behind the Oslo Opera House, The project promised to blend opulence with sustainability. Plans included a 60-bedroom resort, helipad, super yacht marina, spa, amphitheater, and even horse stables, all hidden seamlessly within the island's lush landscape. Most of the new structures would be built underground, covered in greenery to preserve the island's natural beauty. High-speed internet, desalination systems, and solar-powered utilities would make it self-sufficient. A 21st century vision of privacy and luxury. When completed, Scorpios would once again host the world's richest and most powerful, though this time, as guests, not owners, the spirit of Scorpios. But no matter how much Scorpios changes, the spirit of Aristotle and Jackie Onassis will always linger in the breeze. The olive trees he planted still sway over the beaches he built. The chapel where they married still stands, small and quiet, overlooking the same endless sea. Visitors often say the island feels alive, as if the ghosts of the past still walk among the gardens at dusk. Maybe that's true, because Scorpios wasn't just another property, it was a symbol of ambition, of love, and of the eternal chase for peace in a world that never stops watching. Legacy among the waves. When we think of old money mansions, we picture stone castles and chandeliers, but Scorpios was something else entirely. A living mansion surrounded by water and sky, designed not for permanence but for perfection. For Aristotle Onassis, it was the final masterpiece of a man who built his empire from nothing. For Jackie Kennedy Onassis, it was a fragile dream, a place where she tried, for a moment, to be free. Today, Scorpio stands at the crossroads of history and modernity, still dazzling, still private, still whispering stories of the people who once called it home. The Christina O, the floating mansion of the Onassis Empire. If Scorpio's island was Aristotle Onassis's kingdom, then the Christina O was his crown. It wasn't just a yacht, it was a floating palace, a symbol of triumph built from the ashes of war, and like everything Onassis touched, it carried both beauty and drama. From warship to wonder. The story begins in 1942. During World War II, the ship was known as HMCS Stormont, a Canadian anti-submarine frigate that served with courage across the Atlantic, and even helped escort Allied ships on D-Day. When the war ended, most of these vessels were sold for scrap, but Aristotle Onassis, always the opportunist, saw possibility where others saw rust. In 1948, he bought the tired gray ship for only $34,000, pocket change for a man whose fortune by then was measured in millions. To everyone's surprise, he didn't scrap it, he transformed it. The transformation. Over the next 3 years, Onassis poured an astounding $4 million into refitting the frigate, a sum that would equal nearly $50 million today. He hired architect Cesar Pau and a team of European craftsmen to remake the warship into a masterpiece of grace and power. When the ship re-emerged in 1954, it was unrecognizable. Gone were the guns and steel decks. In their place stood marble staircases, hand-woven carpets, and grand salons glowing with chandeliers. Onassis renamed her Christina after his beloved daughter, and in that single gesture, turned a weapon of war into a symbol of family, a wealth, and legacy. A palace at sea, the Christina O was no ordinary yacht. At 325 feet long, it could host more than 30 guests in 18 luxurious cabins, attended by a crew of 40. Its walls were lined with rare woods, gilded mirrors, and works of art collected from across Europe. But what truly made it legendary were the details. The kind only Onassis would dream of. There was a mosaic-tiled pool that could transform into a dance floor with the flick of a switch. A bar carved from the timbers of a sunken Spanish galleon, inlaid with ivory and decorated with the teeth of orca whales. A fireplace of lapis lazuli, glowing blue like the sea. And of course, the famous Ari's bar, upholstered, according to legend, with whale foreskin leather, a detail that shocked some and fascinated others. Every inch of the ship radiated extravagance, but it wasn't only about luxury. For Onassis, the Christina O was a statement. I have conquered the world. the guest list of legends. Soon the yacht became the epicenter of international glamour. In the 1950s and 60s, to be invited aboard was the ultimate honor, a symbol that you belonged to the most exclusive circle on Earth. The guest list reads like a who's who of history. Winston Churchill, John F. Kennedy, Marilyn Monroe, Maria Callas, Frank Sinatra, Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and Prince Rainier and Grace Kelly all stepped onto her decks. Diplomats struck deals over champagne. Actors fell in love under the moonlight. The Christina O wasn't just a yacht, it was a floating stage for power and desire. Onassis would stroll the deck in his white linen suits, cigar in hand, laughing boisterously as the Mediterranean shimmered around him. Wherever he docked, Monte Carlo, Cannes, Capri, the yacht drew crowds like a celebrity itself. Maria Callas and Jackie. Before Jackie Kennedy came into his life, Aristotle Onassis had a long, intense relationship with the opera diva Maria Callas. Their love story, passionate and stormy, unfolded largely on the Christina O. She was the queen of the arts, he was the king of commerce. Together, they created an atmosphere of fire and music, nights of opera arias echoing across the sea. But when Onassis met Jackie Kennedy in the 1960s, the dynamic changed. He was drawn to her elegance and mystery, and soon she would replace Callas as the woman most often seen on deck. The world press followed their voyages closely. Jackie in sunglasses and scarves, Aristotle beside her, two figures who seemed to embody the very idea of wealth and power. Life aboard. For guests, a stay on the Christina O was an experience unlike any other. Days were spent swimming in the Aegean, or sunning on the upper deck as chefs served fresh lobster and fine wine. Evenings were for music and conversation. Frank Sinatra might sing a song at the bar, while Churchill told war stories under the stars. The crew was trained to anticipate every need before a guest spoke a word. Jackie often invited close friends and artists on board, turning the yacht into a floating salon of ideas and laughter. Children played in the pool that mirrored the sky. Aristotle smiled, content to see his world alive with joy, decline, and neglect. After Onassis died in 1975, the yacht passed to his daughter Christina. She gifted it to the Greek government, hoping it would serve as a national symbol. Sadly, it fell into neglect. By the 1980s, the once sparkling Christina O sat in a Greek dockyard, rusting, its glory fading beneath layers of salt and time. It seemed that the era of Onassis glamour had sailed away for good. The rescue. But in 1998, another Greek shipping magnate, John Paul Papanikolaou, known to friends as Big John, refused to let history die. A former business associate of Onassis, he bought the yacht and began a massive $50 million restoration project. It was a labor of love that took 3 years and hundreds of craftsmen. Restoring the Christina O was no easy task. The ship's narrow hull, built for speed, not comfort, made every renovation a challenge. Yet, Papanikolaou was determined to keep its original spirit alive. He recreated the mosaic pool, the lapis lazuli fireplace, and the famous bar, exactly as they had been. Each suite was refitted with pastel themes, mixing nostalgia with modern comforts. When the yacht finally returned to the sea, she shone like new, a tribute to the golden age of Onassis. A new life on the waves. Today, the Christina O is more than a museum piece. It still sails, available for private charters to those wealthy enough to afford it. Weekly rates can reach hundreds of thousands of dollars, and its guest list remains exclusive. Modern royalty, media moguls, and Hollywood icons. The yacht has even appeared in popular culture, from Netflix's The Crown to the 2022 film Triangle of Sadness, reminding the world of its storied past. It continues to host celebrations and family reunions for the rich and famous, including a recent event for media giant Rupert Murdoch. Each time it glides into a harbor, people still stop and stare, because this is no ordinary ship. It is a living memory of an era when luxury had a soul, and its captain was a man who believed he could outdo the gods of Olympus. Symbol of a bygone era, the Christina O represents something larger than Aristotle Onassis himself. It embodies the post-war dream of limitless ambition, A belief that if you worked hard enough and dared big enough, you could turn a warship into a temple of pleasure. It stands for the idea that wealth could be more than power. It could be art. For Jackie, the yacht was a place of escape. For Onassis, it was a declaration that the boy who once fled war in Smyrna had risen to rule the waves. Every brass railing, every polished deck tells that story. And though the parties are over and the guests long gone, the Christina O still glides through the Mediterranean like a ghost from a grander age, carrying with it the echoes of music, laughter, and dreams that once belonged to the Onassis family. The final sanctuaries: Jackie's Horse, Farm and Redgate Farm. By the mid-1970s, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis had lived a life few could imagine, marked by beauty, tragedy, and the constant gaze of the public eye. She had been a first lady, a widow, a wife, a mother, and one of the most photographed women in the world. But beneath all that, Jackie longed for something much simpler: peace. She found it not in palaces or penthouses, but in quiet, open landscapes, in places where the air smelled of grass and sea salt, where she could ride horses, plant flowers, and finally live like any other person. These were her final sanctuaries, her escapes from the world's spotlight, and through them, we see a different side of Jackie Onassis, not the icon, but the woman. The horse farm in New Jersey. In 1974, 1 year before the death of Aristotle Onassis, Jackie purchased a small estate in Peapack, Gladstone, New Jersey, a picturesque village known for its rolling hills, meadows, and horse trails. The property, once a barn, sat on nearly 10 acres of land and was surrounded by fences, fields, and thick woods. To anyone else, it might have seemed modest compared to the grand mansions she had once known, but for Jackie, that was the point. A life among horses. Jackie had loved horses since she was a little girl. Riding gave her a sense of freedom, a kind of control she rarely had in the rest of her life. When she moved to Peapack, Gladstone, she returned to that love fully, spending mornings on horseback and afternoons walking through her fields with friends or her children. Locals would sometimes catch glimpses of her trotting quietly along the bridle paths, always polite, always understated. To them, she wasn't the famous Mrs. Onassis or the former First Lady. She was simply Jackie, another neighbor who loved horses. She often attended local equestrian events and fox hunts, becoming a quiet fixture in New Jersey's horse country. Her estate was close to the Essex Hunt Club, where every Thanksgiving morning, riders would gather for the traditional blessing of the hounds before the annual hunt. Jackie attended those gatherings often, smiling, chatting, blending in, something she rarely could do anywhere else. The barn that became a home, Jackie's Peapack. Gladstone Home was originally an old barn that she transformed into a cozy, rustic house. She kept much of its original charm: exposed wooden beams, high vaulted ceilings, and wide windows that filled the space with light. Outside, she painted the walls soft yellow with crisp white trim, giving it the look of a storybook farmhouse. Inside, the decor reflected her personality, simple but graceful. There were fresh flowers, framed photographs of her children, and shelves lined with books instead of gold or crystal. Her living room had overstuffed armchairs and patterned rugs, inviting anyone who entered to relax. Friends later recalled that the house didn't feel like the home of a billionaire's widow. It felt like the home of a woman who had finally found calm, peace, and privacy. What made Peapack Gladstone special wasn't luxury, it was privacy. For the first time in years, Jackie could step outside without being followed by cameras or reporters. She could host small gatherings, ride her horses, and read on the porch without worrying about who might be watching. She called it her refuge, a place where she could simply exist. When Aristotle passed away in 1975, she spent long hours there, grieving quietly but surrounded by the peace of the countryside. Even as she returned to New York for work and family, this farm remained a treasured retreat, a reminder that healing sometimes comes not from grandeur, but from simplicity. After Jackie's death in 1994, the property was sold in 1997 to her neighbor and friend, Marjorie MacDonald Walsh, for about $147 million. Sadly, the house was later demolished to make way for new construction, but to the locals, its spirit still lingers. A reminder of the days when one of the world's most famous women found joy in something as ordinary as tending to her horses. Redgate Farm, the ultimate retreat. If Peapack Gladstone was Jackie's place of peace, then Redgate Farm on Martha's Vineyard was her dream come true. Purchased in 1979, it would become the final and most beloved chapter in her story, a home that reflected not just who she was, but what she valued most. The land of freedom. Redgate Farm sat on 340 acres of pristine coastal land on the southwestern edge of Martha's Vineyard, a windswept island off the coast of Massachusetts. The property stretched for a full mile along the Atlantic Ocean, complete with 2 freshwater ponds, rolling meadows, and untouched dunes. When Jackie first saw it, it wasn't the glamorous estate it would later become. It was a working sheep farm with a small hunting cabin and a few outbuildings. But to Jackie, it was perfect, raw, wild, and full of possibility. She had always loved nature, and here she saw the chance to create a home that felt like a part of the landscape, not a disruption of it. She hired architect Hugh Newell Jacobson, known for his refined and modern take on traditional design, to build her a new house, something elegant but humble, building a home from the heart. By 1981, the transformation was complete. The new main house at Redgate Farm was designed in the Cape Cod style, whitewashed, gabled, and timeless. It had 5 bedrooms, 2 studies, and wide windows that looked out over the ocean. Every room was filled with light and air, connecting the indoors to the outdoors. There was also a 2-story guest house, a caretaker's cottage, a barn, garages, and even a small boathouse. The property included vegetable gardens, blueberry patches, and walking trails that wound through forests and fields. Landscape designer Rachel Bunny. Mellon, Jackie's dear friend and the woman who had helped redesign the White House Rose Garden, was brought in to craft the surrounding grounds. Together, they created something breathtaking. A natural haven of windswept dunes, flowering shrubs, and quiet ponds that reflected the sky like mirrors. A family retreat. At Redgate Farm, Jackie was finally free to be herself. She swam in the ocean, rode her bicycle down dirt paths, and hosted family picnics under the open sky. Her children, Caroline and John Jr., grew up exploring the beaches and meadows, often joined by their cousins and friends. For them, this was paradise, a world away from politics and fame, where laughter replaced flashbulbs, and the only schedule was the rhythm of the tide. Jackie once told a friend that Redgate Farm was the one place where I can breathe. And for over 15 years, that's exactly what she did. Even as she continued her editing career in New York, she returned to Martha's Vineyard every chance she got, especially in the summer. When her grandchildren were born, they too would come here, the next generation running through the same fields where their grandmother once rode horses at sunset. The spirit of the land. Redgate Farm wasn't about luxury, though it was, by any measure, magnificent. It was about harmony. Jackie believed that homes should reflect the soul of their owners, and this one did. Calm, intelligent, resilient, and endlessly graceful. Every detail, from the choice of materials to the preservation of native plants, spoke to her respect for the environment. Even decades later, the land remains mostly untouched, a sanctuary for birds, wildlife, and the memory of the woman who cared for it so deeply. After Jackie passed away in 1994, her daughter Caroline Kennedy inherited the property. Caroline made careful updates to keep it livable for a modern family while maintaining her mother's original vision. In 2000, she worked with architect Deborah Burke to renovate and expand the main house, blending contemporary design with New England tradition. The legacy of Redgate Farm. In 2019, after nearly 4 decades in the family, Caroline Kennedy put Redgate Farm on the market for $65 million. The listing described it not just as real estate, but as a rare and remarkable piece of American history. And it truly was. Even now, those who visit Martha's Vineyard speak of Redgate Farm with a kind of reverence. Locals still recall seeing Jackie on her bicycle, her scarf fluttering behind her, smiling as she rode along the cliffs. They remember her not as a celebrity, but as a neighbor who cherished the land, the sea, and the simple joys of life. The legacy of grace. From the halls of the White House to the shores of Scorpios, from the London salons to the quiet meadows of New Jersey, the story of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and Aristotle Onassis is one of transformation, of how love, loss, and legacy shape two of the most fascinating figures of the 20th century. Their homes, scattered across continents, tell this story better than any biography ever could. Each mansion, island, and retreat reflected who they were at that moment in time. The London apartment, where elegance met influence. The New York penthouse, a refuge from grief and a space for rebirth. The Scorpios Island estate, a dream of freedom and love. The Christina O, a symbol of triumph at sea. The horse farm and Redgate Farm, where Jackie finally found serenity. Together, they form a map of a remarkable life, one that spanned empires, oceans, and eras. A closing reflection: in the end, what remains isn't the marble or the chandeliers, the yachts, or the guest lists. It's the feeling, the sense that behind all the headlines and the history books was a woman who sought beauty, and a man who sought immortality. Aristotle Onassis built monuments to wealth. Jackie Kennedy. Onassis built sanctuaries for the soul, and though both are gone, their homes still stand, quiet, radiant, and eternal, as witnesses to the idea that true legacy is not measured in fortune, but in the grace with which we live and the peace we leave behind.